Hey guys, your coach James Wilson here with another skills clinic. After my last one on body position, I got a couple of good questions about how does body position apply to pedaling. I was demonstrating basic body position on a bike and mainly demonstrating the attack position when you're standing up and not pedaling. So how does that apply to pedaling? And actually pedaling, seated pedaling and standing pedaling require two different applications of body position and two different kinds of postures. Now, the principles are the same, which is basically learning to move from the hips and not from the shoulders in order to achieve good body position, but how that applies to those two different kinds of pedaling will change. So what I want to do is go over the two different postures, show you the best way to apply good body position to seated pedaling and standing pedaling, and then show you a couple of exercises and explain how these exercises help you achieve that better pedaling power and pedaling position on your bike. So, got my bike set up on a trainer. Figured it'd be a lot easier to do it on this trainer than outside rolling around. Haven't been spent a whole lot on a trainer, so have to excuse me if I'm a little unsure of exactly how steady this thing is, but it seems to be holding up pretty well for me. So, first off is seated pedaling position. So the first thing is, again, if we're moving from our hips and not from our shoulders, a lot of people, they sit on their bike and they move from their shoulders to get in a position. So they end up like this. They've got a very little bend at the hips. They've got a lot, their upper back is rounded, their shoulders are rounded forward, their shoulder blades are winged out, and they end up with their elbows locked out, which, as we went over in the initial clinic, we don't want those elbows locked out. We want some bend in our elbows to allow us to move around and maneuver the bike. So what we want to do is hinge from the hips to get into position. So you see now, I'm in position, but I've got a little bend at my elbows. I've got a good straight spine. I've got much more bend at my hips instead of this position here. So this is where most riders end up, sitting a little more upright, elbows locked out, a lot of round in the upper back. This is where we want to be, where you're hinging at the hips, maintaining a good long spine, and you have a little bit of bend at the elbow as well. So you can see as you're pedaling at the downstroke here, even if we are achieving almost full lockout, we're not achieving full hip extension. There's definitely some hip extension that can be had. So this position here isn't going to use the hip extension as effectively as when we stand up. So when we stand up to pedal, what we don't want to do is just apply this same position like this to standing up pedaling. What we need to do is actually get over our feet more so that we're driving our feet back and down behind us instead of here. You can see when I'm sitting down, I'm actually pushing my foot in front of me. So that's not what we're looking for when we stand up. When you stand up, you want to really get those the shoulders stacked on top of the hips, get those hips forward, and now you're able to drive. Now you can see at this bottom position, I'm able to achieve full hip extension. So that's why standing pedaling is more powerful than seated pedaling, because when you do it right, you're able to achieve full hip extension. This position also makes standing pedaling easier, because here I'm stacked up. My body is holding itself up. The bones are stacked up, so they're supporting my weight, as opposed to just standing up over the seat and trying to pedal like this. Now I never get a rest. I never get any position. There's no point during the pedal stroke where everything's lined up. So that's one of the reasons when you really get good at standing pedaling and you learn the proper posture, you learn the right technique, the standing pedaling can actually become relatively easy. And in fact, if I'm going on an hour to 2 hour ride, I'll spend the majority of it standing up. I feel far more comfortable standing up than I do sitting down, actually. So that's the difference between the two kinds of posture. Another thing that you want to think about with standing pedaling is, like when you're running, you don't run, or you don't want to run straight upright and be pulling yourself along. When you're running, you should almost be falling forward. Like if you didn't get your foot in front of you, you would fall down. Same thing when you're standing up to pedal on your bike. You kind of want to lean forward and feel like, man, if I wasn't pedaling and my bike was catching up to me that I would like fall over my handlebars. So it's in Jeet Kune Do, which is Bruce Lee's book, he had a really great way of explaining it. It's basically feeling like your balance, your center of gravity is just in front of you and you're chasing it without ever quite letting it get away. So you're not losing it. You still have your balance, you still have your center of gravity, but you're chasing it. It's just a little in front of you and you're running after it, you're chasing it. So that's the idea behind standing pedaling. If you can get this position here where you're nice and tall and feel like you're almost kind of falling forward and you're pedaling the bike, is getting the bike underneath you and just continuing that little endless chase, then that's going to result in much better standing pedaling. So let me show you how a couple of exercises apply to those things. So first of all, what I want to do is show you the single leg deadlift. And the single leg deadlift is a great exercise because it works on not only our seated pedaling posture, but also our standing pedaling posture, but it's really great for that seated pedaling. Now, one of the things with the seated pedaling posture, like I showed you, is we don't ever quite achieve full hip extension. So what we need to do is learn how to drive from the hips as much as we can while maintaining that torso angle. We're not able to get as upright as we are when we stand up all the way. So when you're doing a single leg deadlift or any deadlift really correctly, what you're going to find is that your initial move off of the floor should not result in your chest rising up. You should come up with the torso remaining, keeping that torso angle, staying nice and solid with the ground until your hand hits about knee level, and at that point the hips start coming underneath you and you stand up. So that initial pull off of the floor does a great job of building that core strength and leg strength and coordinating those two things that you need for good seated pedaling posture, being able to be over, having a torso angle. Instead of being upright like this, you're down like this, and you're able to learn how to move with your leg as opposed to moving with your shoulders. So again, you want to have that initial pull off of the ground without the torso angle changing, and then you finally come all the way upright. And at this point, we're working more on our standing pedaling posture, but then coming back down, we're down. Again, we're driving into the ground. My torso angle at the ground has not changed, and then it drives. I come all the way up. So that's how the single leg deadlift really works. And again, we only pedal one leg at a time. And good pedaling, the whole idea of like trying to pull with the back leg has been shown to not be the most efficient, most powerful way to pedal. You want a powerful downstroke with the lead leg and a passive return of the trail leg. So being able to balance and drive effectively on one leg is going to really help that. So that's why the single leg exercises are such great exercises for increasing pedaling power. So the exercise that really helps us with our standing pedaling is actually our goblet squat and our single leg squats. And the reason for that is because, again, when we're standing up to pedal, we're getting a more upright torso. So seated pedaling, we're a little more hunched over. We're having to work on kind of mimicking that bottom pull of the deadlift. When we stand up, we want to get those hips stacked underneath us, shoulders stacked on top of our hips, good tall spine, and we're able to get more of our legs underneath us more. So with the goblet squat, getting set, coming down. Now when I drive my legs into the ground, I'm keeping my torso directly upright. So instead of hunching over, once you get a good goblet squat, a good squat period, down, coming down, and back up, really helps work on that same movement that you're using for your standing pedaling. So again, so that's the difference between seated pedaling posture and standing pedaling posture, and how the exercises that we use in our programs, particularly our deadlift and single leg deadlift, help improve our seated pedaling posture and power in that seated pedaling position, and then how the squats and the deadlift as well really helps with this as well, but the squats especially work on that standing pedaling posture, getting tall feeling like you're kind of falling forward, and the bike, you know, you're chasing your center of gravity without ever letting it quite get away. So, anyways, hopefully this makes sense, and you guys see how to apply the different kinds of posture. This is another reason why seated pedaling and standing pedaling are two different skills and two different types of fitness and two different types of strength. So you can be really, really strong with one, and that will not transfer over to the other. So that's why if you want to get better at standing pedaling, you have to practice standing pedaling more, and you know, doing the strength training exercises to help build that strength, the core strength and the leg drive that you need will help kind of fast track that. So anyways, if you got any questions on this, post them in the forum and I will get to them as soon as I can, and if we need any follow-up videos on this, I will be happy to shoot them. So once again, it's been James Wilson, and I'll talk to you guys in my next Skills Clinic video.